Hello and welcome to today's video, which is going to show you how to dramatically improve your grade just by understanding the mark scheme. In this video, I'll be going through what you need to know. I'll briefly look at the AQA mark scheme, but then I'll translate it into words that actually make sense, that tells you what you actually have to do. And we'll start at grade 5. Then look at grade 6 and in particular how grade 6 is different from grade 5, because there aren't any extra things you need to do to get the grade 6. And then I'll tell you a translation of what you've got to do for each of grades 7, 8 and 9. And rather than describing, it actually tells you what you have to actually do. It's like a recipe or an instruction list. Then I'll show you the skills that my students who got grade 9 actually did. You know, what did they actually do in their grade 9 essays that got them the grade? Then I'll show you something really useful in the AQA mark scheme. So first I'll show you how to find it for free, and then I'll show you how to use the most powerful bit of the mark scheme, the indicative content, in your revision. Okay, it's worth starting with grade 5 just so you can see how realistically easy this is as a grade to get. So last year you only needed 50% to get a grade 5. Now what does that actually look like? Well, you had to write good explanations, but not all the way through the essay. You could have rubbish explanations in parts of the essay and still get a grade 5. You need to focus on the full task, which means you've got to answer the whole question. And typically what this means is if you just write about the beginning of your text and the end of your text, that looks like you're doing the full task. You're writing about all of the text. And consequently, it's really easy to get a grade 5. You obviously have to make a range of points, and the simplest way to do that is pick points from the beginning and the end, and then you have others from the middle. That shows the examiner you've got a range. You'll get the grade 5. You have to choose relevant references, but the good news is if you can't remember a quotation, it doesn't matter. You just write about an example, so you remember what that quotation was about, and you write it as an example in the text, when so-and-so did this or that. Then you obviously have to link those to your explanations. Well, if you're using P paragraphs, then you're obviously doing that. Now you have to mention a range of methods, and this is where your subject terminology comes in. So I will link my subject terminology video up here at some point during this video. So if you're writing about the subject terminology, you're writing about the methods. Then crucially, you have to say how this affects the reader. Now the easiest way to say how it affects the reader is to say how it makes us think and how it gives us ideas about a character or a theme. And automatically, if you're writing about a theme, that will also be a method, and it will also show how the writer is trying to affect our thoughts. So that's a really easy shorthand. If you write about the themes in your text, you're automatically on a grade 5. You have to use some relevant terminology, so that counts twice. It gives you the methods and it gives you the vocabulary that the examiners will reward. So don't forget to look out for the link up there. And you need to know some context. But crucially, you don't just whap in a paragraph about context. The context has to be relevant, and it has to be relevant to giving you the thoughts and the ideas. So once you've done those 9 things, you're guaranteed a grade 5, even if you're currently writing at grade 3. You will be able to do that. Now, grade 6 is not a massive jump. So grade 6 started at 61% last year, and I'm not going to go through all these points. You'll be relieved to know, because it's only the bold ones that are different from grade 5. So in grade 5, some of your explanations needed to be clear. Now all of them have to be clear. Well, that's just paying attention to what you write. Make sure it makes sense. You'll get the mark. Then you have to use relevant and appropriate terminology. So again, that video on terminology is really going to help you, because a lot of the time people put in terminology which isn't relevant. You have to then know a little bit more about the context, so you have several bits of context, and that's super useful because context is just facts. So you just remember the facts, and if you include those facts and relate it to the writer's perspectives and ideas, you're going to get a grade 6. I mean, I can't believe how easy the examiners make it for you to get a grade 6, because in your revision you just have to revise this. What's the writer trying to make me think? What are the writer's points of view? And how do I know? Oh, I'll put in some context from the time to prove that's probably what the writer was thinking. Here's a grade 6. I mean, it really is that simple. And I've got plenty of videos which show you the context of the text you are studying. Okay, to get a grade 7 and above is slightly more difficult, but grade 7 actually isn't that difficult. I'm going to show you why. You need a well-structured argument, so that means you start your essay with the writer's perspective and ideas. That's how you write your introduction. That's called a thesis. I will make a separate video on that, but for now, if you're writing about the writer's ideas at the beginning of your essay, you're in grade 7 territory. Well, then you have to paragraph everything, no problem, but you put the paragraphs in the right order to prove what you said the writer's idea is. During the essay, not all the way through it, but during it, you're going to have two possible interpretations that the writer would want you to think about. Just two is enough to get you the grade 7. Obviously, you want to pick good evidence, quotations or whatever you have. And as before, you write about the full text, which you remember always includes writing about the ending of the text, because that's when the writer's ideas are finalised, rounded off, and you get a new perspective on what the writer thought, and that helps you decide on which of your two interpretations is best. Okay, then you get to these interpretations, and you think, well, what sort of quotations do I use? For grade 7, you start to look at individual words, single word quotations, or phrases which are 2 to 4 words long. Again, you have more than one interpretation sometimes, and you start talking about the author's thoughts again, but this time you link it to the form of the text. So what genre is it written in, and why does that genre help the author get their ideas across? You interpret the structure of the text. So why does that chapter happen here? Or why does this scene happen here? Or why is something left out? You know, if we think about the death of Lady Macbeth, why does that happen off stage? Or if we think about the structure of Jekyll and Hyde, why isn't it told to us in a chronological structure where all the events happen in a logical sequence? Why is that sequence disruptive? If you're looking at one of Browning's poems, why does the woman not get to speak in either of these poems? Why does the lover and the wife, why do they both get killed but don't get to say anything? Really easy things to write about the structure, which will get you into the top grade. And of course you don't have to write about the whole structure of the text, you're just going to write about part of it. And then that word terminology again, so you can see how useful that video is going to be. Now when we get to AO3, you'll see how lots of the skills that you've just done in AO2 and AO1 count double. So you write about more than one interpretation, so your thesis argues why one interpretation is better than another. So hopefully you remember the easiest way to do that is to write about the ending of the text, and then you say, right, finally at the end, this ending suggests that this interpretation was more valid than the other one. That gives you a thesis, it gives you an argument, and it gives you AO3 grade 7. Well, I've already talked about the use of context, and here it is again in AO3, and the context can be anything from the author's life, or what was going on at society at the time, or what was going on in literature at the time, or books that the writer could reasonably have expected people to have read. So anything about any biblical reference, the writer would have expected everybody to have known the Bible intimately. Any reference to Shakespeare, they would have expected every educated reader, if you're looking at the 19th century novel, for example, to have an intimate knowledge of Shakespeare. And you just link that to your interpretation and you get into grade 7. And as I said, in your conclusion, you're writing about the end of the text and you're saying why one interpretation is therefore more convincing than another. Now, this would be a massive video if I took you through each of those in turn with examples. But obviously, all those examples are available in my literature guide that I've taken these bits of text from to help you understand. However, you don't have to buy the guide. I'm now going to tell you how the mark scheme will show you how to do those things that I've just explained. So to find the mark scheme, you're going to type AQA into your search engine, and then you're just going to click on subjects, because that's how you're going to search them. We're looking for English, so we'll click on English there. We've got a choice now of GCSE or AS and A-level. We're going for GCSE, and then we're given the option of English language or English literature. I'm taking you to the English literature one. The most useful links are here, and we're looking at the sample papers and mark schemes, and then we get this ability to search. We're just going to look at the mark schemes, but I can only show you the sample paper mark schemes because otherwise AQA gets upset with me. So I don't want to infringe copyright. I'll click on that. 4 mark schemes come up. I'm going to click on paper 1, Shakespeare and the 19th century novel. Okay, the most important part of the mark scheme is what's called the indicative comment. Now here what's really useful is the examiners tell you what content they would expect you to put in the answer for each of the assessment objectives. Now this is a fantastic way to revise because every year, this is a question on Macbeth, loads of these will come up again and again and again. So if we just look at Lady Macbeth here, we're always going to have power in terms of status. Will come up whatever character you're looking at. So that's an easy way to get AO1 marks. We're always going to have how the character changes to get our AO1 marks, and that shows you the importance of writing about the character at the beginning and then at the end. We're always going to be able to write about the contrast from the beginning to the end. So now you can see how this advice that I've been giving you is going to work with every single essay and move you up to get full marks in the assessment criteria. If we go to AO2, we start looking at language. The examiner wants you to write about plot development, and that will be true whatever the question is every single year. We're always going to be able to write about imagery of the supernatural in Macbeth. That will link to every single character. They're all influenced by the supernatural. So another really big clue as to what we've got to revise and what we've got to put into our essays. There's this really interesting idea here of what pronouns are used, whether you use thee or thou. So understanding the difference between those two and which one was intimate and which one was formal will always give you top grades at AO2. Look for that. Then we can start thinking a bit more broadly. The ideas about the role of women. Well, this is the patriarchy that I keep banging on about in my revision videos for you. So you'll always be able to write about the patriarchal society. Not just in Macbeth, but actually in every text that you study. Again, the supernatural comes up. Again, some knowledge of Christian belief between heaven and hell. Some knowledge about the class system at the time, the status of people. Now, I keep telling you, please don't forget, these things will be relevant in every single essay that you write on Macbeth. Okay? Now, the same is true if you're studying Romeo and Juliet. Let's go down the indicative comment, and particularly to the context. So that's the one that's so easy for you to see how it will fit any single essay. You're writing about the role of parents in society. What was Shakespeare's view about that? What was his view about marriage? There are lots of details about Shakespeare's marriage that you can use. And then the role of the father. what did Capulet expect from his daughter in this patriarchal society? And why would he be so horrified that she would refuse to marry Paris? And then this idea of the contemporary audience, what they would have expected. So those things will be relevant no matter what the question on Romeo and Juliet. And the same is true when you're writing about the 19th century novel. The indicative content will work in exactly the same way. Right, well, you want to use that indicative content in two ways. So in my guide, I give you an essay on Great Expectations, and I write down for myself that if I use the indicative content, the essay that I write, most of it will fit any essay title that you'll get in that novel. And I've tried to show you why the indicative content will fit virtually every essay. Okay, in my revision, I include absolutely everything that's in the indicative content because it's my revision. And this gives me an essay of much too long a size, 1,800 words virtually. But that doesn't matter because this is all my revision. Right, my next step is to think, well, how much can I realistically write in 45 minutes? So you've done your mocks, you know what your speed is. I know that I can comfortably write 700 words in 45 minutes. So my job is to reduce that massive essay down to something I can write in 700 words. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself there. I'm going to reduce it by 700 words. You might only be able to write 700. But I know I can write 1,000, so that's what I've done. Interestingly, my students who got grade 9s wrote between 900 and 1,200 words in their essays. Historically, you've been able to get grades 8 with 700 words, and you can certainly get grade 7 with 700 words. Obviously, in my guide, I'm also trying to teach you how to get 100%. Why not aim for grade 9? Because even if you miss it, well, you'll probably hit the grade 8, and definitely you'll get the grade 7. Okay, the other way to use the indicative content is not necessarily to write the whole essay. So here I've got an example from A Christmas Carol, and then I've written the indicative content here so you could see what the examiner might be looking for. But hopefully you'll remember that context was relevant to almost everything in the top grade. So the great thing here is if I write about everything that's in the indicative content for AO3, I can now write myself 3 paragraphs which I know are going to get me grades 8 or 9 for that part of the essay. And I can plan that in advance, and remember, this context will be relevant whatever the question is. So I can plan 3 paragraphs that I know I'm going to write in my essay no matter what the question is. Yeah, I'll have to adapt odd words and focus it on the character that the question's about, but these 3 paragraphs will be relevant to every single question I answer. In my guide, I take you through the stages, so you might just write 2 paragraphs, which will give you grade 6 and 7 context. And I also show you how one simple paragraph can get you grade 5 context, even if you're writing at grade 3 at the minute. So now we've seen how super useful the indicative content is, especially AO3, which is definitely relevant to every single essay that you can possibly write. Now you're in a brilliant position where you can go onto the examiner's website and not just get the indicative content for one paper, you can get them for numerous years. You can nag your teacher for the papers that aren't available to the public but are available to your teacher, and then you can write your essay and give it to your teacher and get them to mark it. The other thing you can do is write your context paragraphs, post them down below for me, and I will mark them for you, okay? And I guarantee that every single one that I get, I will mark and give you a comment on how you can improve it. I can say that confidently because most students won't have got this far in the video. If you've got this far, you're well on your way to getting grade 7 already because you've got the determination to succeed. So that's a cast iron promise for me. If you write context paragraphs for any of your text based on all the indicative content, I will mark that for you. I really look forward to it. And don't forget to subscribe if you would like more awesome tips on how to get the top grades. See you soon on my channel.